So the first thing that I want to do with this quiz is actually set a home page. You don't have to do it necessarily, but I quite like a little introductory scene, I suppose you could call it, within my videos. Within my whatever I make, whether I make a website or a flash file, whatever it might be. So we've got all of the layers that we set out in the previous video, and the first thing that we want to do is to stop the playhead. So see, you have all of these frames going across the screen here. In this actual kind of video, in this product, they're actually not going to make a huge amount of difference, to be honest, unless you decide to start putting some animation in there. That's entirely up to you. I'm not going to put some in there myself, but if you do want to, you just have to kind of cater for it when you put the scripting in there, really. But the first thing that we want to do is to stop the playhead, otherwise it will just play all the way along here ad infinitum. So we need to actually stop it on the first frame. You could potentially have stuff flying in all over the place if you wanted to. I'm not going to do that. I mean, you could use a little motion tween, and you could have a couple of seconds long, and you could have stuff flying in if you wanted to. However, I said I'm not going to do that. My first part of this quiz is literally just going to be almost like a splash screen, and first thing we're going to want to do is to go into Window and then Actions, which will bring up my Actions window, and I'm just going to give the command of stop. So that will stop the playhead on frame 1. Now I'm going to close this, and I'm going to bring in my first image, and I've actually put this on the wrong layer. I'm just going to cut this and paste it on the right layer. I'm not going to be too fiddly with it. Obviously, when you're doing your own quizzes, you can create images in Photoshop or wherever, and then you can bring them in. You can make it look beautiful, but don't spend too long on it. Otherwise, you'll be wasting your time a little bit. So, when I now test this movie, you will see it just goes to that frame 1 and doesn't move, which is what I want. So that's fine. Now, one thing we do need to do now is enable the user to proceed to the quiz itself. So I'm going to create a very simple button, and I'm just going to use the rectangle tool over here. And again, you can create your own fancy looking buttons in Photoshop if you so wish. I'm not going to do that at this stage anyway. Then I'm going to select the text tool up here. I've changed colour to white because obviously it's black background, and you won't be able to read it otherwise. I typed in the word proceed. I'm going to click select. I'll drag it further down onto the button. Oh, whoops. I put all this on the wrong frame again, haven't I? Now, one thing that you can do that will make your life easier when you're doing this sort of thing is group them together. Sorry, I don't know why I've just right-clicked there. You can highlight everything that you want grouped, and then if you hit Control and G, it will group it all together for you, which is what you want, really, because not on every occasion, obviously, but if I'm now moving it about, you can see the text goes with it rather than being left behind, which is a good thing generally. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go back into my actions, and I want to have an action for the button, so make sure the button's selected. And then I'm going to want to use a code snippet. Mine has appeared randomly behind the actions for some reason. And then I'm going to want to tell it to go to a different frame in the timeline and stop. And obviously the code snippets are quite nice in terms of helping you structure this. And of course I haven't given my button an instance name. That's rather foolish, isn't it? Don't forget that you first of all need to convert it to a symbol. So I've called my symbol next_btn. So in when you're creating this sort of product, when you are creating symbols, it's obviously a good idea to name them something that reflects what they actually are. So obviously this is a next button, and you would then also, or at least I have throughout the course of whenever I've created these in the past, which probably stems from when I first created Flash files when I was at university way back when, I've always put _btn afterwards. If it was a movie, I put _mov, MOV. It just helps me kind of recognize it, because sometimes you might have a next button or a next movie, whatever it might be, and so it does help me just recognize it. So I'm going to click OK on that, and then you do need to give it an instance name at the top. So your properties may already be out. Mine's kind of hidden, and I'm going to call it next_btn again. It will just help me recognize it. And now when I go into the Flash actions page, it should let me do, that's annoying, it should let me do a go to frame and stop, which it does. You can get rid of all these grey bits, by the way. So basically this is an event listener, so it listens for you to, or the user to perform an action, which in this event will be a mouse click, which is this bit here. And then it says for it to go to a frame and stop. So in this instance, it's given the pre-made number of 5. You could obviously rename your frame if you want, but I'm going to change this to 20. Now, something to bear in mind is that the way that I'm going to do this quiz, the actual frames themselves, it doesn't really matter how far away they're spaced. I just kind of prefer this as it just looks a little bit neater when I come to actually create it. So that's pretty much all of the actions that we need for the beginning frame. And obviously, as the button that I've just made points to frame 20, this is where we will need to put the next lot of items. So I'm going to insert keyframes all the way down here, and these are going to be blank. You may need to specify insert blank keyframe rather than just straight keyframe, because if you bring the keyframe over, then it's not going to be blank because you've already got a button there. So for everything else, it doesn't really matter so much. But yeah, insert keyframes all the way across. So now when the user clicks the button, it's going to go to that frame. Now again, what I want to do is, I was going to say stop, but it's stopped by the action script previously. Sorry, I had a brain freeze there. Now just to prove that this is kind of working, I'm going to go to the question layer, and I'm going to just put some text in. Test to make sure it's working. Smiley face. Then I'm going to do a test like that, and you can see it's working, which is great. So I'm going to pause there before we move on to actually making these questions. The questions themselves, it does become a bit more tricky from this point onwards, so brace yourselves really.